Okay, hello everybody. I am so excited today to be talking to one of my former students, Samson, and I hope I say your name right. Last name, is it Sembeba?
Sembeba.
Sembeba. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Samson Sembeba. I was thinking, have I ever said your last name? I always just said Samson. So Samson Sembeba.
Yes.
And it's a treat to have him here. He is just a very impressive person to me. And I think that you are going to see why I think that. He's very accomplished. We're going to talk about some things he's got going and a book that he is the author of. So today, so you all can get to know Samson, I thought I would just ask him to tell everybody about himself.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I can tell you very much, I admire her as a teacher. She is phenomenal. And so just a little bit about myself. My name is Samson and I am a pastor. I am an author. I'm a speaker. And I seek to just motivate people and inspire people to see the value that they have and to make a positive impact in the world. And so that's what makes me passionate.
Okay, I love it. Sharing passion and purpose.
Yes.
Okay, so I told him I kind of came up with some questions. I'm going to scoot over. Kind of came up with some questions that I am interested in finding out about. And one of my quirky questions that I like to ask is, describe yourself in 3 adjectives, because I think that kind of says a lot, about how you view yourself.
Yeah.
But what are your 3 adjectives?
So my 3 adjectives would have to be creative, curious, and inclusive.
Oh, those are really good. Curious is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
With our conversations and then things that, in class and all of that, I agree. I agree with all of those, actually. So I'm wondering and go ahead and show us the book, because I want to talk about that. And if you can, it's so impressive that you've authored a book. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to show everybody this, and then I'm going to put a link to the book. But it's more than a degree, and I see an A+ on here, which, is the best.
Yes.
But a must-have workbook for students. So what spurred you on to write this book? Where did the idea come from? And then I want you to tell us about the book.
All right. So the idea came from when I had graduated high school, and after about a year or 2, I went back to work at a boarding academy where I had recently attended. And when I worked at that academy, I worked with a lot of students. It was a boy and girl boarding academy, but I was mainly in the boys' dorm working with the guys. And there was guys that were struggling with classes, guys that were struggling with, their social life and connecting, and people who were struggling with just being on the campus and finding purpose on the campus. Mm-hmm. It was a high school, but it was almost like a similar college setting. But working with these students for the period of time I was working with them, and just helping them, giving them advice, trial and error, and just walking with them through their journey. After my 2 years at that school, I came to realize that, hey, if I would have been able to come back to this school, because I struggled extremely in high school in so many different areas, but if I could come back and tell myself certain things, I wish I could repeat it, because I would be able to succeed in a mighty way. And so I sat down with the principal and I told him that. I was like, man, I wish I could go back to the good old days so I could just redo some stuff. And he told me, aren't you going to school in the fall? And I was like, that is true. I am going to school in the fall. He's like, well, you have an opportunity to exercise what you think, would work. And when I came into the school year, I just found myself succeeding in so many different ways and gaining so much experience. And in the end, I had a friend say, like, man, you should write a book on some of the stuff that you've been doing out here. And I was like, that would be cool. And I just began to fall in love with the idea of like writing something to almost essentially share with others to help them on their journey through college. And so thus the book started forming in my mind, and then eventually came into existence, which I'm excited about.
That's awesome. So I'm wondering, because I feel like this would be a powerful tool for students, but then also other people, because the ideas that you talk about, I have a feeling, are about building community, about strengthening relationships, Well, just tell us a little more then about maybe
So
a couple other things in the book.
So in the book, it's geared towards college students and your college kind of experience, because essentially I'm just sharing my experience. But one of the things I wanted to do in this book was I really wanted to make this book like a timeless book. Like I didn't want to focus on something that could potentially change in the next 5 years. So I wanted to make it as timeless as possible and as relevant as possible just to the human experience. And so a lot of the things I focused in on were essentially like things like taking risks and having the community that you need before you start taking risks. The things I talk about is the importance of asking questions and being curious, because curiosity helps with your academics, as well as curiosity helps with whatever you want to embark on down the road. I talk about relationships and kind of like on the, not just platonic, but on the like intimacy route, right? Because a lot of college students are experiencing relationships. And so I talk about all these various topics. And I had a group of people who read through the book before it was published. And I had a friend reach out to me. He was like, dude, I'm not even in college. And I was like, man, this book was beneficial to me and just where I'm at. So I guess essentially you can apply a lot of these principles to the workforce, if you're in a work setting, if you're in a community that you just recently arrived to, if you're at a church that you just showed up at and you don't really know what to do. A lot of these principles apply to those things. Those stories are more, say, geared towards like a classroom type experience or like a dormitory type experience.
It's interesting because your personality to me is very outgoing. You don't know a stranger. You can walk up and introduce yourself, to people. And so when you talked about it taking until your senior year to figure out how to build a community, or the importance of building a community, I think you probably were maybe doing that all along, but it probably clicked at that point. And it's so important for people to have a strong community around them, to surround themselves, but you also have to surround yourself with the right people. So what would be some of your tips on how to find the right people to surround yourself with?
Finding the right people, I think, falls into the category of like knowing who impresses your heart the most, right? It's not just about going up to all your teachers and saying, hey, will you be willing to guide? But and the best way I know how to explain it is, I remember when I first did like a tour of the campus, and they just kind of showed me different faculty, different people. There was an individual that really piqued my interest. Like I was like, man, this person was interesting. Like I don't know what it was about them, but something drew me to them. And so I sat down in their office and I asked them the question of like, hey, like I'm just curious, what your thoughts on, how a student can really succeed here. I just asked him that question just because, just popped in my head. I was just curious. And man, he shared with me all these different tools, tips, different organizations to get involved. And so I think when it comes to building community, you want to build with somebody who's willing to build with you, right? Like if you run up to somebody or have that conversation and you see that door that's, closed, don't get discouraged and say no one wants to help you, but rather go find the people who are willing to invest in you. Like, for example, you, right? Like, I remember I scheduled an opportunity for us to, meet.
Oh, I remember.
And
yes, you're the only one who's ever done that.
Yeah.
So kudos to you, but yes.
Yeah, but what's really cool about that is you seemed interested in me. And so if you would have been like closed off, like, like, hey, if you have any questions, just email me your questions rather than, setting a time to meet or whatever, then I would have noticed like, okay, I'm not going to pressure, the situation. But when you find people who are invested in you, whether you ask them a question, you want to connect